Coming up on The World Today. COP26 summit draft deal calls for stronger carbon cutting targets by end of 2022. Standoff continues as stranded migrants camp in front of Polish police lines on Belarus's border. United Nations says 72 Tigray and aid lorry drivers arrested by Ethiopian government. Thanks for joining us on the program today. I'm Tenyola Shoboale in Lagos. It appears discussions at the climate talks in Glasgow are gradually winding down as the first draft of an agreement setting out how the world will tackle climate change has been published. The document expresses alarm and concern that humans have caused warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius already and says impacts are being felt everywhere.
The first draft of the COP-covered decision asks countries to revisit and strengthen the 2030 targets in their nationally determined contributions as necessary to align with the Paris Agreement temperature goal by the end of 2022. The draft also reminds countries that under the Paris Agreement, they can submit new, more ambitious climate pledges at any time and for the first time calls for countries to phase out coal and fossil fuel subsidies. It also calls on countries to accelerate the phasing out of coal and subsidies for fossil fuels, a demand of climate change campaigners, and urges developed countries to urgently scale up financial support for developing countries to respond to their needs to adapt to the impacts of climate change. The proposal has been met with a mixed response, with critics complaining it doesn't include enough concrete details or deadlines to adequately address the urgency of the climate crisis and the needs of those on the front line.
We need much more concrete action to be sure that we actually really meet this 1.5 target. So that was one very important thing in the President's text. The 1.5 target is clearly there. We need to meet that. But secondly, people are already suffering right now, even with the 1.1 degrees we've already had. And there needs to be more support going particularly to the front lines of the rising risks, the most vulnerable people that are currently not yet getting the support they need.
So in the draft today, we saw that coal was referenced in the draft, as well as subsidies. That's not good enough. 86% of the emissions trapped in our atmosphere come from oil, gas, and coal. And while we talk about targets and emissions here, these governments, many of them, especially the wealthy nations, are proposing new projects that would take us past 1.5 degrees.
The push for more regular reviews of climate plans is seen as necessary because countries' current 2030 pledges would lead to 2.4 degrees Celsius of warming. The document, which has been published by the UK COP26 presidency, will have to be negotiated and agreed by countries attending the talks. With just a few days left of the summit, analysts have warned that there remains a big gap between long-term targets and shorter-term action. Meanwhile, the conference focus today is on transport. Dozens of countries have promised to phase out petrol and diesel-powered cars, but the US, China and Germany have not signed up.
COP26 President Alok Sharma says he expects near final text of the agreement to be published overnight, after which he will convene all groups and parties.
And we'll be taking discussions forward. The one thing is very clear to me is that there is a spirit of consensus, there is a spirit of cooperation. We need to see that spirit taken forward over the next few days, and I would like us to get to a point that we end with a ambitious outcome, which is what we've wanted all along. But it's up to all of us, together, all parties, ministers, negotiators and leaders. Let's see where we get.
In the meantime, at least 25 people have been killed in floods following a heavy downpour that battered parts of Sri Lanka. Thousands of people have been hit by heavy rains affecting 17 of the country's 25 districts. Most of the victims drowned in the floods. Footage from the capital city of the northwestern province shows bodies of people after a house was destroyed by a landslide in Kurunengala. Most roads, including main traffic arteries, have been inundated, as well as houses. Floods have also been reported in the Australian town of Alice Springs after record rainfall in the region brought the usually dry Todd River to life. Footage showed a motorist being rescued after clinging to a tree for several hours after his car was swept off a causeway in the town. Emergency services used ropes to secure the man before he was rescued from the flood water. Weather services say rainfall in the area have already exceeded the regional record for the wettest November ever. And the air pollution continues in India, where ice-stinging smog covered the capital, New Delhi, for a 6th straight day, with residents complaining the air quality has been extraordinarily bad. They are also calling on the government to act. Pollution in the city got worse in October and November as crop fires and vehicle exhaust get trapped in the cool, slow-moving air for longer. Diwali revelers last week defied a ban on fireworks during the annual Hindu Festival of Lights, making the situation worse. A recent private survey showed that nearly 80% of families in Delhi and its satellite cities reported ailments like headaches and breathing troubles due to the air quality. On Tuesday, the city pledged game-changing steps to clean its foul air, including intensive water sprinkling and a crackdown of the burning of garbage. Away from climate issues, Poland's defense minister says the country faced many attempts to breach the border with Belarus overnight, but now has 15,000 troops to repel migrants. Thousands of migrants have become stranded at the border, the center of an escalating international dispute.
Hundreds of migrants remain stranded on the border between Belarus and Poland as the standoff continues between them and Polish police. Many arrived at the border on Monday and have since then been awaiting passage to Poland and the European Union. The EU accuses Belarus of encouraging the migrants from the Middle East, Afghanistan and Africa to try to illegally cross the frontier in revenge for earlier sanctions imposed on Minsk over human rights abuses.
We are facing a brutal hybrid attack on our EU borders. Belarus is weaponizing migrants' distress in a cynical and shocking way. At our last European Council, we condemned and decided to respond to these attacks, and we asked the Commission to propose all necessary measures in line with EU law and international obligations. We have opened the debate on the EU financing of physical border infrastructure, and this must be settled rapidly, because Polish and Baltic borders are EU borders, one for all and all for one.
EU officials are reportedly closing in on another round of sanctions on Belarus, targeting some 30 entities, including the country's foreign minister and airline Belavia. Belarus President Alexander Lukashenko has denied using the migrants as weapons and blames Europe and the United States for the plight of the people stranded at the border. The president has also won a fresh show of support from his most powerful ally, Russia, which is also blaming the European Union for the crisis, saying it's failing to uphold its own humanitarian values and trying to strangle Belarus with plans to close part of the border. In response, the Polish Prime Minister is accusing Russia's President Putin as well as Belarus of trying to destabilize the EU, which the two countries are not part of. Meanwhile, Poland has denied accusations by humanitarian groups that it is violating the international right to asylum by hustling migrants back into Belarus instead of accepting their applications for protection. Warsaw says the actions it's taking on its border are legal.
Now, Britain's Brexit Minister David Frost says more work needs to be done in negotiations with the EU over post-Brexit trade with Northern Ireland and that he's not ready to give up yet. Britain has repeatedly warned it that it may trigger emergency measures called Article 16, which allows either side to take unilateral action if they deem their agreement governing post-Brexit trade is having a strongly negative impact on their interest. Frost, who is due to hold further talks with European Commission's Maros Sefcovic on Friday, said triggering Article 16 was not inevitable, but may be Britain's only option.
So there is more to do, and I certainly will not give up on this process unless and until it is abundantly clear that nothing more can be done. We are certainly not at that point yet. If, however, we do in due course reach that point, the Article 16 safeguards will be our only option. We have been abundantly clear about this since July, when we made clear that the tests for using Article 16 were already passed. Nothing that has happened since has changed that. The EU, however, seem to be arguing something different at the moment. They seem to be claiming that it will be entirely unreasonable for the British government, uniquely, to use these wholly legitimate safeguard provisions within the treaty, designed precisely to deal with situations like the current one.
Now, the UN says 72 drivers contracted to deliver humanitarian aid have been arrested in Ethiopia's war-torn north. It says the drivers who were working for the World Food Programme were detained in Samara, the capital of Afar region. The city is said to be a staging post for aid lorries trying to reach the neighbouring region of Tigray, where the conflicts flared up last year and where the UN says 400,000 people are living in famine-like conditions. Hundreds of lorries are believed to be stuck in the city, prevented from taking the only viable overland route into Tigray. The UN is currently engaged in talks with the Ethiopian government as to why the drivers were stopped.
Numbers are that 16 national staff have been detained, while 6 have been released. We are, of course, actively working with the government of Ethiopia to secure their immediate release.
Which agencies are they from, and has the Ethiopian government given you any explanation?
Look, there has been, as far as I know, no explanation given to us by why these staff members are detained. There are 16 remaining in detention, and 6 have been released. So that's the breakdown. They come from various UN agencies. They're all national staff. It is imperative that they be released. The Secretary General is frustrated by the lack of our ability to help the millions of people that are in need. Right? That's what it's about. It's about helping millions of people, notably in northern Ethiopia, but frankly throughout the country, that need life-saving help. We've not been able to get into Tigray the aid that we need, the fuel that we need, the cash that we need. So the frustration is about that, our inability really to help the people that so desperately need our help.
Thanks. Are you able to...
Still to come on the programme. All set for Christmas, Jerusalem's Santa Claus brings Christmas cheer to the Sea of Galilee. More details in a moment. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Thanks. A U.S. judge has ruled a congressional committee investigating the Capitol riot can access some of former President Donald Trump's White House records. Mr. Trump had sought to invoke executive privilege under which presidential documents can be kept secret. The inquiry is trying to find out if Mr. Trump had prior knowledge of the riot. Trump supporters stormed the Capitol building on January the 6th as Congress was certifying President Joe Biden's election victory. Mr. Trump has refused to acknowledge losing the election last year, claiming without evidence that it had been rigged. Our Washington correspondent, Maria Bird, joins us now for more. Maria, the former president for 4 years refused to release his tax records. Is there any indication a court order will compel him to release those White House records?
Yes, this judge has now said these records cannot be held. And so the Congressional Oversight Committee for the January 6th attacks on the Capitol are obviously very happy with that. And they are going to now be probing and pushing further to ensure those records are released. Even though it might seem this has been a long process for this January 6th attack, I can guarantee you that they are looking to close this out as quickly as possible. And I believe as these records are being released, it will obviously provide them with some of that missing information that they are looking for to be able to identify exactly what was the cause of this attack, and obviously to put additional security measures in place so this type of thing doesn't happen again. Because the real issue here is that the Capitol is vulnerable until they're able to fully complete this investigation. We know that additional individuals have been identified as being a part of the attack through this investigation. So as these records are released, I think they will be able to more efficiently get to the closure of this.
And we also know that several of the former president's aides have been subpoenaed. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, those aides that have been subpoenaed are individuals that obviously had some sort of insight. We all know that there was a very delayed response to any type of police enforcement making it to the Capitol. And so the real question is, were there White House officials that knew what was happening that were not responding or calling on the police departments to get additional support, those Capitol Police that were on the ground during this attack? And so how does that play into the potential role that any White House official could have had at that time?
And apart from phone records and visitor logs and other White House documents, will the inquiry also be considering media reporting, many of which captured the January 6th riot?
Media reporting, I think that obviously we know that they've been looking at that, I believe, all along. I mean, a lot of that is public records already. So that will be considered and has already been considered. But the real question is going to be that proprietary information that they have no insight into at this time, getting access to that. Even calendars and schedules are going to be pertinent and important because they're going to need to know who was he with, who did other White House officials have meetings with during that time. And so those are all items that will be considered throughout the continued investigation.
What's the former president? He's been sort of quiet, mostly focusing on his social media platform, Truth. What has he said regarding this committee and investigations?
Well, we all know that the president has not fully ever said that the election was won by President Biden. And so the president, obviously, the former president, obviously, is continuing to allow his supporters to believe that there should be some sort of redoing a re-election, and obviously looking for him to run again come 2024. But a lot of what we're seeing now is his preparation and building up his ground supporters. We know that QAnon and various other organizations have strongly supported the former President Trump's administration, and we will see that once we get closer to that time of election period in the U.S., most likely at the end of 2022, we'll begin to hear more from him. So right now he's building his base, and that's really what you're going to be continuing to hear is just very minimal comments from him that are really allowing him to continue to build on what he believes the momentum that he has.
And just before I let you go, Maria, just explain to us what happens after the inquiry.
At the inquiry, the question is going to be who is responsible for the January 6 attacks. And so obviously White House officials and even the president could be held accountable for that, and there could be charges brought forth. And so that is a question. Is there enough evidence to prove that charges should be brought forth against any White House official during that period of time?
All right then, Maria, thank you so much for the update.
Thank you for having me.
To the COVID-19 pandemic, South Korea is urging COVID-19 booster shots as severe cases hit record high. Plus, Singapore should charge people unvaccinated by choice for hospital bills. Here's the global update.
South Korea has encouraged citizens to get COVID-19 booster shots as more elderly people are infected, driving serious and critical COVID-19 cases to a record high. According to official data, total number of severe coronavirus cases jumped from mid-300s in October to 460 today, the highest since the pandemic began. Of the severely ill patients, more than 82% were aged 60 and older. Over in North Korea, the state media has reported shops being disinfected and health workers discussing antivirus measures. North Korea has not officially reported a single coronavirus case, but it has imposed strict antivirus measures, including border closures and domestic travel curbs. Singapore residents who choose to remain unvaccinated and subsequently contract COVID-19 will have to foot their medical bills from next month.
Our hospitals really much prefer not to have to bill these patients at all. But we have to send this important signal to urge everyone to get vaccinated if you are eligible.
Currently, the country foots the medical bills for Singaporeans, permanent residents and long-term pass holders, but this will change on December the 8th. Shops and malls in New Zealand's biggest city, Auckland, have opened their doors for the first time in 3 months as the city, which is at the epicenter of the country's coronavirus outbreak, gradually reopens. It comes amid a pickup in vaccination rates and due to mounting pressure. Mounting pressure from critics calling for more freedom. New Zealand still has among the lowest coronavirus cases in the world, with under 8,000 infections reported so far and 32 deaths. And finally, moviegoers in the Philippine capital are excited to return to the cinemas for the first time in 20 months, following further easing of coronavirus curbs after a downward trend of infections in recent weeks. Only fully vaccinated people can go to the cinemas, which must operate at a capacity of less than 50%.
And finally on the program, on a lighter note, you would usually see Santa Claus in the North Pole as he gets ready to visit homes this Christmas. But today he was sighted in none other than the Sea of Galilee. For Christians, this was the same sea Jesus Christ walked on more than 2,000 years ago. Israel, where the sea is located, saw a drop in tourism in the wake of the global pandemic and is hoping to draw in tourists with Santa's visit. The event, which was organized by Israel's tourism ministry, began at sunrise when the man behind the bid, Jerusalem's Isa Kasi Ise, wearing a Santa costume, paddled a kayak, pulling gifts and Christmas trees to bring to the children living in the region.
Last year I used to put a mask, but I tried to go against Corona because the children, they don't know what's going on around the world because they are angels. We need to bring them the happiness and love and the giving. And that's why we try to go and continue our life, and Christmas is coming, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Ho, ho, ho!
Well, it's never too early to start celebrating Christmas. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Bye for now.